Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Christopher Volk, who's the author of The Value Equation. Christopher, welcome to the program.
Well, Mike, it's just a pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. I want to hear all about what you do and hear about your work with the value equation. I always love when you hear phrases or words that make you think of something, and it's like, you know what? It's the age-old, don't compete on price, provide value. And that's what the measure of success is when you provide value to the market, you get compensated for it. So I'm excited to hear your take on that, but get us started with a little bit of your story and background, and how did you get into the industry?
Yeah, so I've been in finance pretty much my whole business career. So I started off in commercial banking, and then one of my customers was based out of Arizona. So I moved from Atlanta to Arizona and started getting into the business of owning real estate and just renting it to people on a long-term basis. So we started off with chain restaurant assets, lots of fast food properties and casual dining properties, and then we went into automotive parts and service locations. And the idea was to tell people they were just better off having a landlord than a banker's, that if they wanted to really grow their businesses and make some money and create some wealth, that owning real estate was not the path there. I mean, the path was for us to own their real estate and rent it to them and allow them to actually grow their business faster. And we were able to do this, and we took that company public, and I became president of the company and grew it, and we sold that to GE. And then at the age of 47, I decided to be an entrepreneur. After being a part of GE for a year and a half, I just had to leave 350,000 people and go to work for myself. So I worked with some other folks to put together a company, and we grew that to own real estate and rent it back to people and help them grow their businesses. And we were successful. We did that on the New York Stock Exchange. The company did fine. And then later on, I sold that business, and then I started my third company doing kind of the same thing, but just a little bit better. And that company I ran for 10 years, and by the time I left, our biggest shareholder was Warren Buffett. So we've been really good at this, and we've helped a lot of companies grow, and we've done well for our shareholders. And I just decided that I wanted to take a change of life, and I wanted to write a book. So I wrote The Value Equation, and The Value Equation is basically a kind of a guide to how businesses create wealth. And basically, you're appealing to entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs start businesses, and not all businesses create lots of wealth. So I'm there to try to help people to understand financially what it takes to make them to create a lot of wealth from businesses.
I think that's really fascinating. I want to dive into some of the key pillars of creating that wealth, because I know we could talk for probably 3 days straight on the same on that topic. But it makes me think too of, does your book or your work go into just creating the wealth, or do you also provide some guidance on, now that you've created the wealth, let's now start planning for the exit whenever that may be?
No, I don't get into the exit, and I don't get into tax planning or any of these. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on your program where people discuss that. My whole thing is just to give people kind of a roadmap to the financial ingredients that corporations need to have to create wealth. And if you look across the United States and really the world, I mean, if you're looking at multimillionaires, virtually all multimillionaires made their millions by owning stock in a business, and preferably, probably starting a business. I mean, so, I'm struck today, if I go to any sort of fancy neighborhood in any town, most of the fancy houses are not owned by doctors or lawyers. They're owned by people that start businesses. They're owned by entrepreneurs. And so the question is, what's the secret sauce that those people have in common that got them to this point? And basically, it was creating a business that ultimately became worth more than the cost to create, which a lot of companies don't get to that point. So, so I walk through the financial ingredients of getting a company to be worth more than the cost to create, and sort of helping people understand the importance of business models.
You said a magical word there: model, framework, blueprint. Things like that that people need to keep in mind. And I like to think of it as the old saying, "Success leaves clues." And when you can have a framework that is proven to work, it is a template that can work in any industry. Do you find that some of your value equation frameworks work no matter what the industry is?
They're universal. It doesn't matter what the
Yeah.
industry is. Um, and as you look at some of the just best companies in America, whether it's Apple Computer or whatnot, as you start to peel back these companies and look at the sort of financial underpinnings of their business models, these are companies that have like really magnificent business models, but people could be multimillionaires with way less quality of business than Apple Computer. I mean, you can, the bar doesn't have to be that high. And so I want to make sure that people get their feet grounded, that they don't have to try to go for the best possible businesses. I mean, the businesses I ran would never have made me a billionaire, and they're not the best businesses in the world, but I've done plenty well for myself, so I'm not worried.
So let's talk a little bit about the value equation. Do you have specific number of frameworks or pillars, or is there, the top three, frameworks that you talk about? How does that work?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do here is talk and at a high level in generalities, because the equation itself is actually a mathematical formula. I don't want to get people lost in the
We
math.
don't
And
want to
by the
give
way, it's
people
all middle school
nightmares of
math.
remembering back at high school algebra.
Yeah, well, it's all middle school math. It's not even high school algebra, right? So
Okay,
it's
good.
the cool thing about business is that you don't have to be a math whiz to do it. I mean, it's middle school math is all you need. But basically, when you peel back companies, they're kind of probably fewer than a dozen. But let's say the value equation itself is like just 6 or 7 variables. So you're starting off with things like sales, which is one variable that's important, and then you're focusing on operating profit margins, and you're focusing on how much of the company is funded with your cash, basically equity or other people's money that they have to put in equity, versus what I call OPM, which could be OPM is other people's money. It's like borrowing money from banks, or it could be even borrowing, if I'm a landlord and I'm providing all the money for somebody's fast food restaurant, I'm definitely OPM, right? So, I mean, so if
Yeah.
we're providing $1 million or $2 million for somebody's chain restaurant property, that's OPM. So how much money, what's your mix of OPM and equity? What's the cost of OPM if you've got to borrow money? And so how much I have to spend every year to keep the business going in terms of what I call maintenance capital, capital expenditures. So there are basically 6 variables. I mean, and then you've got taxes on top of that. So, and the idea is to you string those variables along to create what's current shareholder returns. I mean, those 6 variables get you to what's the shareholder going to make, and
Yeah.
and businesses can tweak all these formulas. I mean, if you're the CEO of a company, you can, the first thing you got to do is create a great product that people want, but then the second thing you got to do is try to wrap that inside of the best business model you could possibly design. The greatest business models deliver the greatest rates of return to shareholders. And so I'll give examples of all kinds of companies, and I'm doing a video series on it now. So your listeners can look this stuff up and see what it takes.
I love the concept of OPM, other people's money. But I think that sometimes a business owner might be a little reticent on that, because how much do you take on? How much risk do you take on? So how do you balance using other people's money, like borrowing, with accomplishing what you want to accomplish by balancing that risk and make sure that it is calculated risk versus just give me as much money as I can get?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, and the word you used was calculated risk. So, I mean, and I've been all about calculated risk in terms of starting companies and trying to understand what it was going to take to make them work. And I always think that that when you're using OPM, there are all kinds of horror stories about people getting immersed in too much debt. I think that, or too much OPM in the case of my wording. And I think that the key is to run a business where you have, a reasonable margin for error, and you got to be able to make mistakes, and all businesses make mistakes. And you got to have reasonable margin for error. And if you borrow too much money, or if somebody is, and hopefully lenders have some discipline so they don't lend you too much, but sometimes lenders don't have discipline and they'll lend you too much. I mean, and it's up to people who are in business to understand, what is too much, and to understand that they have to have a reasonable margin for error. And of course, the companies I've run, have had, we've used, in terms of the mix of OPM, the last company I ran, we were using 40% OPM and 60% equity. So basically not, a pretty huge equity mix. But I've also done it where I've done 70% OPM and 30% equity, on the real estate side. So, and all these companies have worked well, and we've had good margins for error and all this stuff. But it's the margin for error piece you really got to focus on.
It's kind of like leakage or waste, with, retail shops will say we have to factor in X% for shoplifting or waste, if it's a food produce business. So there's always going to be the things that fall between the cracks. If a business owner is reading a book looking to increase their value, what are the typical places that they are going to be starting with first to address? Because you can't do all things at once, but where are some of those gaps that they should be looking for first?
Gosh, it's going to be every business is going to be a little bit different, right? So so you'll have businesses like discount retailers, like a Walmart, which is going to be a high volume, low margin business. Costco, high volume, low margin business. Then you're going to have software companies where you basically have a higher margin business, and you have less invested in machinery and equipment and real estate and so on, which is one of the reasons why software has been such a great business and why there's so many wealthy people who have made their money in technological businesses. And as you're looking at every industry and every business by themselves, you're thinking about where the low hanging fruit is. What can I do better? What should I take in house? What can I outsource? I always think too that, like, for me, I always like to think about what my key competencies are. So what am I really good at? As you're creating a business, you're focusing on the product first and foremost, but then all companies provide a solution, to a customer. So the solution could be in the financial planning world, like you specialize in, or it could be in, buying a sandwich for lunch, or sending a rocket to outer space. I mean, there's a solution that you're providing, and then after you focus on what the solution is, you're trying to think about, okay, what are my best core competencies? Why do customers want to go to me? I mean, why, and so I typically have tried to narrow my businesses down to sort of 4 or 5 core competencies. And if it's not a core competency, I try to outsource it, because if it's just a regular machine, thing, I try to outsource it. And if I can outsource it to somebody who's better at that stuff, then I can save money, I mean, so trying to generate higher rates of return involves strategies to boost sales, strategies to cut your costs, strategies to lower business investment. So, strategies to speed up my cash flow cycle. And all those are basically embodied in the value equation.
Something you said made me think about an idea, which is blocking and tackling. And here's what I mean by that. This is football season at the time we're doing this conversation. And, you can have all these fancy plays in football, but in reality, until you get good at just blocking and tackling and being really, really good at that, don't insert fancy plays, because it's just going to implode on you. So I'm sure you can speak to times that businesses have tried some big, fancy, intricate thing to solve this problem. But in reality, let's plug up this hole first and that hole second.
Yeah, well, the thing about entrepreneurs is that entrepreneurs by their nature are super optimistic people, and they're easily excited by, like, the most recent shiny object that's out there.
Yeah.
And when you're starting a company, you have almost nobody's working for you. You're doing so much yourself. I mean, you're wearing like lots of hats. I mean, if you got like a small company and you're starting it, everybody's like wearing lots of hats, and you can't afford distractions. I mean, you have to really focus on the things that really matter, and try to um, avoid anything that's going to distract you from what you're trying to get accomplished. And to your point, blocking and tackling and understanding what the basic things are. That's why, it sort of helps to sort of really think this stuff through and understand what's my core competencies, what am I going to focus on, how am I going to get sales to grow, how am I going to cut my expenses, how am I going to minimize the investment I have to make in a business. I mean, if I'm creating a business, the less I have to invest in it, then the less OPM and equity I even need, and the less I need, the more money I'm going to make. And so you're trying to think about all these different levers that you have, but you're trying to narrow them down just a few. And if you can, the fewer you can narrow them down to, the better you are. And then to keep it simple. And a lot of people I find, don't really sit down and like take the time with a pad of paper to focus on what their business model is going to be, and as a result, their business model just happens to them. So instead of making things happen, they just fall into kind of a business model, and once you do that, it's really hard to undo it. So it's useful to like try to map yourself out before you get buried in something that's going to be difficult to undo.
Yeah. 100%. I'm sure that there would be some, let's call them issues and opportunities to fix that could be like 1-2 steps. Here we go. But if you were to map out a full, value equation, how long is it going to take? Is this a 6-month process, a 6-year process?
Oh, I think it's a 6-month process. I mean, I think it's going to be upfront. I mean, I think
maybe it never ends, because about the time you work through steps 1 through 10, you better go back to step 1 and tweak, because maybe some things have updated and changed.
Oh, sure. So all the best businesses out there are constantly reassessing, what they're doing, and trying to get better at it. I basically created 3 companies, and the first company had 250 employees. By the time I left the last company, we had 125 employees, and we were doing, call it, 4 times the amount of business that we did in the first company, right? So, we were doing a lot more with a lot less, and just being, really intelligent about it. And part of it was that I made sure that we just focused on core competencies, and I took advantage of technology wherever it happened. So today you've got all kinds of technology that's never ending, whether it's AI or other forms of technology that robotics, that make a difference in terms of being able to make your business model better, and able to attract investors. I mean, to if you're going to attract someone like a Warren Buffett to buy your stock, I mean, you better have a pretty clear business model, and you better be able to explain it, and you better be able to have a pretty good, elegant business model that could be repeated over and over again. And that's the idea.
Yeah, love it. Well, Christopher, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. And if someone is listening to this going, I need to create some more value in my business, what is the best way they can learn more and pick up a copy of your book and reach out and connect with you?
Love that. So it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. It's enjoyed being with you.
What's the best way that they can pick up a copy of your book?
Yeah, well, you can find the book on Amazon easily. You can also go to my website, which is ChristopherHVolk.com. And you can contact me through the website too, if you want to find me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.